All right,
Yeah.
so we're doing a Canopy training session on money organizing accounting. Should be pretty quick and simple. There can be further training with payroll accounting. So overall, the money accounting for Canopy, the answer to Tamisha is yes, by the way. So with payroll accounting, it is very, very similar, right? So the similarities are basically like the end goal. So the end goal is to calculate the total amount that needs to be transferred, right? So let's use, let's say we have 56 BCH, right? To be Bitcoin Cash, right? So this is the goal is to have 56 BCH. So then we need to add up and do all the BCH accounting. You know, how much do we have? If we have more than 56, then we are good. If there is less than 56, we need to do a transfer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the end question is how much to transfer, you know, either 0 if there is enough, or X amount, and where to transfer it from. So the where to transfer it from is a harder question, and that's, you know, I would deal with that part of it. But you guys can pretty easily help with the how much. Okay, so are there any questions so far?
No, from my side.
I couldn't hear Pressy. All right, so let's.
I'm on. Sorry, it's noisy on my end.
Okay, but you understand. You're on the same page, right? You understand? You're good.
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Okay, so let me look for the accounting spreadsheet. Canopy Assets Distribution Calc spreadsheet after buffers. So this might be it. Let me see. So step 0 would be, you know, have link to Canopy Assets Distribution spreadsheet. Yeah, I think this is correct. So BCH. Yeah, this is right. This is good. All right, so this is the spreadsheet here. And here's the link. Again, this is all Canopy, so Canopy is all transparent, open, and etc. I wonder if I have the Canopy main doc in here anywhere. Horizon.
Access.
You need access?
I was just trying to.
Okay, so here's the, also I found the link to the Canopy main doc, so I just want to put that there. So a lot of Canopy documents are not shared, and you're going to need access, primarily just because I've been the only one working on it, and no one has asked for or needed access. So if there's something that doesn't have access, just let me know, and we'll try to keep you focused on things that you actually need.
Yeah. No problem.
Because they can get pretty confusing. Also, it looks like I seem to have lost the document that I was using before. Did I link it? I did link it. Let's just go here. Oh wait, but I need to do access. Oh, it looks like it's working for me. Computer is going so slow. All right, so share. There we go. All right, so do Albina. Albina. So I'll just start you guys as commenters so you don't like mess anything up on accident. Because I'm just showing you how to do it now. But then when you need to start doing work, we'll add you as an editor. I don't see you, press C. Let me just make it. Wait. Let me just make it so that everybody should be able to see. Anyone with the link can comment. There we go. All right, so now everyone should be able to comment. Okay.
Thank you.
So let me know when you can see that. Well, you can just watch it on my screen. I don't think you actually need to look at it on your own, but.
Yeah, watching on your screen.
Okay. All right, so step 0 is obviously to have access and know where it is. So let's start going through the other steps. So in this case, you can see the account. So column B is the account. So it's just similar to the accounts, with our payroll. You need to know what the accounts are, and then you need to ask how much is in the accounts. But then it gets a lot more different and confusing and detailed. Like there's a lot of details that go into the accounting. So the most important thing to understand about the accounting is, so step 1 is basically going to be like, find the accounts and update the amount in each account, right? So what you need to understand about Canopy accounting is very different than normal accounting. So the number one goal of Canopy is not gains slash profit, right? The goal is stability. Does that make sense? You guys understand?
Yes. Yeah.
So the way we create stability is primarily through, we have a bunch of different ways, but primarily through buffers. So a buffer is one way to help build stability. So think about it like this. Bitcoin goes up and down, 5 to 15% in a day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that means, let's say you have, let's say you've got 0.100 Bitcoin, right? So it's kind of like, this would be like $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, right? If it's going up and down 5% a day, that would be as much as 0.015 Bitcoin changed per day. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So if we want 0.01 or 0.0 0.100 Bitcoin of stable finances in our account, we want a minimum of basically 0.120 Bitcoin. All right? Does that make sense? So basically, this would be a 20%. This would represent a 20% buffer, right? So cyber currencies have very large buffers, and so that buffer basically allows us to say, okay, not only do we have 0.1 Bitcoin in our account, the probability of us having 0.1 Bitcoin next week or next month or the month after that is relatively stable because we have a 20% buffer to deal with potential major changes in Bitcoin from day to day. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, so where does that happen here? That happens in K through like G through K or so. Okay, so basically the important columns here are column D. This is the actual current assets. And then you have column L. So column L is the assets with no position. All right, this means that I should explain this, right? So this is the first point, is understanding, you know, what would this be? A buffer, right? So this would be understanding buffers. So that's the buffer. Then the other part is understanding a trade. So final trade versus active trade. Okay. So you need to understand the difference between a final trade and an active trade. So a active trade means that you have a quote position, right? Or that you are in position, or it's active, right? Active. So final trade means there is no position, or that it is sold. Okay, so if you buy, let's say you start with US dollars, start with base US dollars, right? And you buy, you know, 1 Bitcoin, right? That would be a active position, right? You start with US dollars, so this is inactive, right? No position. You understand? You guys follow me?
Yeah.
So let's say Bitcoin, let's say you buy 1 Bitcoin for $10,000, right? So then Bitcoin goes up to $15,000, right? This would be an active position, right? So when Bitcoin goes up to $15,000, how much money have we made in relationship to the accounting?
5,000.
Wrong.
No,
Right?
no. We don't have any money on that unless we sold it.
Unless we sold it, because it's not actual money until you actually sell and finalize the trade, right? So then you sell the Bitcoin for, let's say you sell the Bitcoin for 12,000, right? This would be no position, right? So when the Bitcoin goes up to 15,000, it's, yes, we have a potential gain of $5,000, but it's only a potential gain because if we haven't sold it yet, Bitcoin could immediately, within an hour, certainly within 1 day, crash back down to 10,000, right? There's no guarantee it's going to stay at 15,000 ever.
Yes.
So as soon as we sell the Bitcoin for 12,000, then we are back to having no position, and we can calculate a gain, a potential or a pre-buffer gain of $2,000. Okay.
Yes.
So in final trade versus active trade is very, very important, and we, in the term we use in the spreadsheet, is no position. So on step L, like column L, right? So in column L, we put the total amount of cyber currency or assets with no position. So if there is a current position, it would not be present on the spreadsheet. Okay? Are you following me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So again, there is a whole nother level, and just so you know, we have a separate spreadsheet with all of our active trades and all the calculations and gains and losses with active trades is totally separate from the accounting, which is only with final trades that are no position, right? All right, so once we calculate the no position assets, which is a whole separate process that we're not even going to cover right now, but you know we would go through each account and we could estimate the total assets. Then through K through G is just basically getting the actual amounts, right? So the most important ones are K, J, and I. So let's go through K, J, and I. So once you update the actual amount of no position, you're practically done already for that account. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So everything else is pretty simple. So column K is the buffer, right? So we already discussed the buffer, so you guys should understand that. So column K is the buffer. Every single cryptocurrency has a different buffer value. I think with Bitcoin, I might have it done already. Yeah, so you can see the buffer down here. So this is the buffer required based on the risk and the total valuation. Okay. So if I put this over here, BCH is usually higher, so maybe it's like 10 or 11% as opposed to 7.5. So Bitcoin is usually more stable than BCH. So depending on each cryptocurrency, its general stability level over the course of a month or a quarter would be the basis for the risk, and then based on how many the leverage level, you get the risk percent. So you can see that if we did at 11% base risk at a 9 or 10x leverage, we're risking 100% of the value. So as soon as we get to 9, 10x leverage, you get to the point where there's no value anymore, right? If we're going to leverage up to that amount, it's such high risk that basically, as far as we're concerned, there is no money left unless we sell and get it out of that risk. That it's too high of a risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for Bitcoin, you've got it as much as you can go up to 13, right? Because it's a little less risky than BCH. All right. Anyways, we don't need to worry about that. But the goal for our risk buffers is that they are green. So we'd want all the risk buffers to be green. Typically, it never is green because we lose money, and it's bad, and it's just like your buffers are always smaller than you want them to be to tell you. And so we have to build the buffer first and foremost. So this is a 5% buffer. This one is a 12.5% buffer. Okay. And you can see over here, see how this is USS main swap and it says 3x. So you come down here, 3x would be a 44% buffer. So really this should be 44% buffer to be green, but it's not green because it's orange, right? So you could even say it's orange or red, right? Because really we want it to be a 44% buffer if we're going to have it at 3x. So really we want to get rid of the 3x and bring it down to some other amount, okay? This one is just normal x. So this would be, I believe, 0x. And so that is 11%, and we have it at 5%. So we make it yellow. Okay?
Okay.
So do you guys have any questions on column K? I mean, basically, I can take care of this most of the time, but you guys need to know what it is and why it's important.
The question is, as the risk goes up, then the buffer must be.
Yeah, we want the buffer to be green. So let's say column L, it starts at 29.85, right? Let's say it goes up to, let's say we go up to 35, right? So let's say we update this and we went from 29 to 35. The first thing we want to do is increase the buffer to 11% to make it green, right? And so that gets rid of all of that money. right? Then over here, we might add a loss buffer, and then we're going to add an endo gain. So then maybe we put another 3 in loss buffer, and then next thing you know, you're back down to 23, so you can't change it. So we started with 23 assets. We went up to 35, right? So went from 28 to 35, but we were able to increase the variability of the buffer, so that goes up to green. And then we get our loss buffer at 3, right? And we still have not, we don't have any endo gains, so there's still no gains as far as the actual assets. We only increased the buffer to build stability. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So the goal is stability. So the most important thing is column K. We want the stability of column K to be the highest possible. So the more buffer we have, the more stability we have for all of our crypto assets. All right.
Yes.
Cool. So basically, anything that's in the buffer, we basically don't consider it as real money because it literally disappears in the flash of a second. And the buffer is the only thing that prevents us from basically having to change our budget week to week, day to day, because of how big the variations are in the crypto finances. So when we have assets in crypto finances, we have huge buffers to stabilize all our finances, and that's the primary way that we stabilize our finances, because we basically can ignore all that money. We're like, okay, that money doesn't even exist because literally tomorrow it could be gone, right? But the idea is when we stabilize our buffers, we want to be protecting the actual assets and make it so that in the future those assets are still there so that we can budget them and work with them. Because over time, we should be able to increase the total value of all of our assets. All right, so for column J and I, these ones are just kind of random, but the loss buffer is like, let's say your entire buffer goes away, right? So this is your variance buffer or your volatility buffer, right? So if this goes away to 0, like, so let's say instead of 35, it went down to 25, and our variance buffer went to 0. If we still have a loss buffer, we could take this down to 2, right? Or 3 or so, and then potentially still keep the assets. I guess the 25 is too big. Maybe it's like more like, well, no, let's say we have 28. Let's say, okay, let's go back. So let's go back to 35. So let's say it's at 35, right? And let's say in 35 it goes down to 32. So if it went down to 32, we would end up at 20 and we'd have to cut down our assets from 23 to 20, right? But instead of cutting down and saying we had a loss, we would just cut our buffer, right, down to like, 3%, and then we don't have a loss. Does that make sense? But then our buffer would go to like, orange or red. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if our total assets go down, we can compensate with the buffer and the losses. Oh, actually, we could have done it differently. So let's say this is still at 11%. We can take our losses down to 3, so we have an additional loss buffer. We can keep our variance buffer up, and then we can keep our assets stable. All right, so that's the goal. Basically, the loss buffer is this extra buffer in between the volatility buffer. The volatility buffer is always changing. The loss buffer already has a little bit of stability, but it's still relatively, we might dip into it here and there, right? But then where we actually start talking about gains would be the endo gains. So the endo gains, so let's say we get our loss buffer up to like, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So we have like a little bit of a loss buffer in case the variance buffer gets annihilated, which happens all the time. So then if we are able to go up, so let's say instead of 32, it goes up to 40, all the additional gains go into the endo gains. So the endo gains would be like, at this point, would be 4. Okay, so if let's say we had it up to 40, we would have a variance buffer of 4, right, which is still green. Maybe we want to get this up a little bit, so we could go up to 5, and then once we get up higher above 11, we could go to blue, right, turquoise, because it's above the green level. You've got our loss buffer of 4, and we have endo gains of, in this case, 2 or 3. As soon as we have endo gains buffer, then we can start changing the actual assets. Typically, the best way to do it with the endo gains is it all depends on how often we want to calculate, okay? So let's go back to our notes. So column L is the no position assets. Column K is the buffer for the volatility or variance of the crypto asset. Okay, so this will represent the percentage change on a day to week to month basis. Okay? So you guys understand step 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this again is the volatility buffer. This one is the no position assets. So then step 3 is column J. So column J is the loss buffer. So the idea is that we're always changing the variant, the percentage is always changing. And remember, it's a percentage. So because the variability is a percentage, every time the assets in position change, it automatically changes. K always changes, right? So if I change this to 41, this is automatically going to change because it's a percentage of the total assets. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So K is constantly changing. Our loss buffer is not changing. Our loss buffer is actually the first thing that we're dealing with actual stability. So the loss buffer is where we actually start dealing with stability. Nothing before the loss buffer is stable, right? So this is the very beginning of stability, and it's kind of like our buffer between stability and non-stability. So this is going to be, we want to add to this first and help build a loss buffer if there is an increase in assets. So then step 4 is and again, a lot of this stuff you guys won't need to deal with. I will be able to deal with it, but you need to know what it is so that you understand and aren't making mistakes. So then column I is the endo gains, and this gets a little bit more complicated and more important. So endo gains, so let's say you increase the endo gains. So once we have stable endo gains, then we can start transferring into our stable assets, okay? So there's 2 ways to do this. One, we could say, okay, we have 2 endo gains, right? And we do the calculation. So we calculate the asset gains or losses when we do the asset calculations for gains/losses. So let's say we do that, it could be once per week, it could be once per month, or once per quarter, etc. So whenever we actually are calculating the gains and losses, this is where the endo gains starts taking effect. Okay? So the way that it works is, let's say you have endo gains of 2. There's 2 ways to do it. One, you could just say, okay, this could be 0, and then now we can make this 25, right? So in that way, we increased our total assets by 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And just so you know what that is, currently BCH is worth $239 per BCH, which would be 2 of them would be $500 or $450. Okay.
What if we doesn't close any buffer? So the endo gains will be more than 2. Am I correct?
Yeah, but then that will destabilize. So the less buffer we have, the more unstable the assets are.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So also the way that we increase, the best way to increase current assets, for example, is that when you're in 3x, you go down here, 3x, you have to have a 44% buffer, right? So if we want to increase our assets, it's very easy to do that. You get rid of the 3x and you put it instead into 1x or 0x, and then you can have more assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, I get it.
Yeah, so the best way to increase assets is by decreasing risk. Another way to decrease risk is if we have an option to, if we're in base US dollar and we are investing in Bitcoin or investing in some other type of cryptocurrency that's high risk, we could put it in a cryptocurrency that's smaller risk and have more assets. So the more risky the investment, the less assets that we can stabilize. All right?
Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. So
But
for example, BTC is risky. So like for example, ETH is not risky. So
no,
we're
other way
going to
around.
invest.
Bitcoin is the least risky of all assets, with all crypto assets.
Okay.
So where Bitcoin is 7.5, SPY is more like maybe, I mean, with the crash and everything, it's probably more like 5%. All right, so it's hard to get out of something that's less than 5%. We might be able to play around a little bit with some of the US dollar, but it just depends, okay?
Yes,
there's always going to be a risk, but the thing is that the more you risk, the higher potential gains you have.
Yeah.
Right? So the reason why you risk more and more money is because you can make more money. Right? So it's just this constant balance between stabilizing and risking. But either way, our goal is stability. So in the short term, we're definitely going to be bringing all the finances to less risky assets as best as possible and just organizing the asset. That's why we're doing money organizing as opposed to trades. Okay, so if we were worried about trades, we do more. Well, it's both. Both the trades and the money organizing, both important. But we want to do trades that are less risky to increase our current assets, our current stable assets. So this would be actual current stable assets. All right. Okay, so let's finish this up. So there's the second way that you can do it. So again, the first way, let's say you're calculating our gains. You go from 0 endo gains and you increase by 2 to our actual current assets. So that's the first way to do it. Not the best way. The other way that we do it is that, that would be unstable. So there's two ways. So the first way is unstable. Unstable gains would be to transfer all or most of the endo gain assets into our stable assets, right? So let's say, 1 week you transferred, 2 BCH, right? The next week there may be 0, right? Then the week after that, it could be 1. So the idea is that it's always unstable how much you're transferring in. So your total gains from week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter will be unstable gains where they're not stabilized and they're not coming in at any sort of regular intervals, right? So then the other model, which is much better, and I like it much better, and the whole reason why we create why we have all these buffers and endo gains and loss gains and everything, is what we would call a stable gains. So stable gains means that you always transfer a percentage of your total endo gains so that every week you have a similar increase to assets, and you can plan and budget long term based on your gains. All right. So basically, what this would mean is, let's say you have 2 BCH, which is equal to about $500, right? So let's say every week you do 10%, right? If every week you did 10%, you would have $50 of gains on week 1, right? The next week you might have $45 of gains. The week after that, you might have $40 of gains. So the idea is that every week you're only doing 10% into the stable assets, And that will allow us to not only have stable assets to build stable gains, which can help us go into double gains, triple gains. When you have a stable income, you can plan ahead, and actually we can oversee our budgets in a way that we actually know how much money is coming in for the long term. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So stable gains is definitely much, much, much better, right? Because then every single week or every single month we would have about the same amount of money coming into our budget, and that we're constantly, not only do we have a stable assets, we would have stable income, which would allow us to increase our budgets and expand in a way that would never be possible with unstable gains. So if unstable gains, 1 month we made a bunch of money, but then the next month, the month after that, we got no more money and it all kind of crashed, we would have to change all of our budgets accordingly. But if we balance it all out so that the income is coming in over time, it will help stabilize the budgets over the course of many months, and will help us, be not only stable with our assets, but stable with our changes in budget changes and income. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's everything. So in that context, let's say we're doing, let's say we're doing 10, 20%. This would go down to 1.8, and over here you have 23.2. All right. So usually I try to stick to whole numbers because it's just myself, but if all three of us are working on it, we could easily start dealing with decimal places and overseeing a much more detailed asset coordination. The last column is column H, which is the HODL. You don't need to worry about this, and the reason why we take out the HODL is because it is already in the exchange buffer, which is in line 4. So we have 9 BCH for the exchange buffer when there's half of them in each of the exchanges. So it's 4.5 and 4.5. Right? So this is actually already accounted for over here. So then you add up all the assets, you get 59. That's greater than 56, which is the total goal. So we have a whole additional 3 compared to what we need. So it's important to note here that our goal is having 56, but in reality, we actually we would have 62 on this, right? We haven't done the calculations. We don't know how much we actually have, but based on what it says here, we would have 62, but of that's stable, it would be 59. All right, so does you guys understand? Are we all on the same page?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
And then over here you have the total value, how much is in here currently, and then it also gives us our future goals, right? So we might want to stabilize maybe having 23 BCH in this particular account is too many, and we want to stabilize and balance the amount we have in all the different accounts so that we aren't putting too much risk in any one place. All right, so the goal is always stability, so diversifying and having it in different types of accounts at different risk levels. Like we would never, ever, ever put all of our, tokens in something that's like 44% risk. We would just never do that, right? But if we split it up into 8 different accounts, one of the accounts could be like 3x risk, right? So this is a 3x risk, but it's only one of them. So that reduces the total risk of our assets overall, while increasing the possibility of getting more gains, right? So that's how we diversify all of our assets, where we don't want to put all of them at risk at a high level, but we can do higher level risks with smaller amounts. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. All right, so if you guys have any other questions, we can, but that's pretty much it. I guess the last step here that we didn't write is that, step 5 is the last thing is, adding up all of the account stable assets. And then step 6 would be, comparing to the amount needed. So let's say that we had losses, right? If we had losses and this needed to become 20 and this was went down to 10, right? Now we have a loss of, we have 56, right, is the number we need. If we only have 52, that means we had a loss of 4, right? So that would be bad. So what does that mean overall? That means that if we are in base needed to transfer. So if we are in base BCH, right? And we have -4, or instead of 56, we have 52, right? That would mean if BCH went up, we would be losing more money than if we simply exchanged more, like let's say, Bitcoin and put it in BCH. All right, so it's just helping stabilize our overall finances. We never want to be in a negative number here. We always want to be positive or equal as best as possible, so that if BCH like skyrocketed, we wouldn't be losing more money on top of the other money that we'd be losing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So overall, it's bad if this is a negative number. We want to make sure that it's a positive or a 0. All right. So I think that's pretty much all. I'm just going to kind of, rewind back to the original so that, well, actually, let's leave that there.
Neighbors having this huge party.
Huge? Can you hear them? How many people? Weird. All right. So anyways, I'm just going to put this more or less back to where it was. So this was at like, what was it? 10%. This was like around 28. And then step 6 would be, step 7 would be finding out where to transfer the assets from. And then step 8 would be completing the transfers. Right? So sometimes it's the other way around. Like let's say there were just massive gains and we, instead of having like, 59, we had like 100. Let's say we had 40 more than we wanted. And then you go into Ether and we had Ether losses, right? We might want to transfer BCH to Ether to balance out between the BCH and Ether. So it'll go the other way around. So instead of wanting to increase, you'd want to decrease. But that's pretty rare because, usually we lose money, we don't make money, right? All right, so are there any other questions? We're obviously going to want to, index all of this and make sure that we are tracking the responsibility. And this would all be done as part of VA work. We do it together for now, but in the long run, it could become similar to the payroll accounting, where all you really need to know is how much you just need to know column L. So as long as you have column L, that's all you would need to know. So when I work with Pressy, if we continue, we're going to be going into the live trading to calculate how much column L is. And so here's the live trading calc spreadsheet. So the live trading calcs is a whole separate responsibility that we have to do in order to be able to do the assets. But overall, it's easier to do the live. Like the only reason that we'd have trouble with the live trading is that it's been a while since I've really been getting all the trading up to date. But when we go through the assets, we don't need to actually do the trades to know how much is in the accounts. So I can quickly and easily go into the accounts, see how much is in the accounts. And typically I do that on the live trading. So let's say we go to BCH live trades. So here's the USS swap. On column J, K, and L, you have the amount long, amount no position, and amount short, the total amount, and then this would be how many assets we have, and then this would be the change in assets. So right now it says 23.78. And this is the position, right? So remember, some of it's in position, so then you have to subtract the difference of the position, so you're left with 22.08, right? So if I went from here to here, I would go 22.08. See? That makes sense? So again, just to make sure it's clear, the calculations are very easy. I would just go into the server, see how much there is long, how much there is no position short, what the total is, subtract the in position amount of either gains or losses, and then that would give us the total that's currently in the account. Done. So it's actually pretty simple and easy. With BCH, there'd be like 1, 2 accounts. There's only 2 accounts. So it goes really quick. For BCH at least. All right, so we're not too worried about this part. This part will be pretty easy and we can do it together. The harder part is the actual calculating of the current assets and the endo gains and everything like that. And making sure it's all organized. All right, so I need to take a break. If Pressy, if you want to continue, we can. But I think we're good for now, okay?
Yeah, let me take a rest, guys. We'll meet in the main session.
Cool. All right, I need to take a break.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Pressy, are you going to continue? I guess you can hear. All right, I'm gonna just send her a Skype message that I'm taking a break, and then maybe she'll be available in like 5.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Good work. I'll talk to you later. All right.
Okay.